Hey, what's going on, everybody? We're back with another draft analysis, this time covering the game between G2 and BLG. For those that remember, this was Swiss round 5, and this was in fact the series that did send G2 home, pretty much. They basically went home right after this, which is a little bit unfortunate. Even though a team of this caliber and this much hype, really exciting to watch, especially from a draft perspective, but ended up not being enough. So thought it would be really good to break this down real quick and understand some of the picks that they were actually cooking really hard in this draft. So quick look at the bans. In the context of a G2 draft, this is not very spicy for the first bit until we get a little bit later on into this draft. So G2 opened up with a B1 Maokai, as you should, in fact, because J4 is banned. There's not many other picks that are available, so there's absolutely nothing wrong with going for this. You could go for other priority picks like the Rumble here. You could take Xayah B1 if you wanted to, because that's that route. Only Recon is banned though, so BLG signing up for this Xayah basically indicates that they are totally okay going with it alone. And as you can see here, G2 are totally okay with that because as long as Recon is banned, they do feel like they're able to play into the Xayah, as they should, to be honest with you. The Xayah actually is, let's say, overvalued. If Xayah was a stock, she would be overvalued in this meta because right now, although her kit being able to have survivability is very unique and powerful, and having that wave clear is very strong, there are champions that can really curb her in the early game, and teams are just continuously trying to cook up new ways to really shut that down. The Sejuani pick does not surprise me with the field being as it is, but what does surprise me is B2B3 Kog'Maw with the Braum. Now, there's a lot to break down here because obviously the Kog'Maw is something to talk about in itself, but also the Braum to go along with it and the order in which it's picked. So let's think about this. First, let's talk about the Braum since it's the easier part. Normally, Braum is a champion that's extremely reserved for stages where it's very, very well established that the enemy team is basically going forward, because Braum can effectively only function well as a backwards champ. This is why he's typically reserved for counter pick support, even as late as R5. Really needs a lot of champions to be revealed in order to have maximum effectiveness. The reason for why G2 is almost pre-picking it, just to provide transparency here, is because they have Kog'Maw. This is where the Kog'Maw into the Xayah matchup ties in. So, Kog'Maw, technically, as a front-to-back ADC, has way, way, way more output than Xayah could ever wish for. Right? It's just a straight stat check. In exchange, that is all Kog'Maw can do, and he needs a lot of resources to surround him. Hence, why Braum is picked around him at the same time. This is justifying and providing clarity to you all why G2 picked it here. If it were me, I would still not pick it here. I still think that G2 could have pushed this back, unless for some reason this pick was dominating scrims and it was already known that it was dominating scrims and it would be banned otherwise in phase 2. However, even if that were the case, there are a lot of options that would still do something similar to what Kog'Maw does. So this is why I think this pick in this slot is a little bit strange. Keep in mind that champions that can function the same way as Braum are still in the game. So Renata is still in the game. There's a very low chance that Braum would be banned if they didn't reveal Kog'Maw on B2B3. And it's just like, it's a good attempt, but there's a couple, it's a little bit rough around the edges, is the way I would say it. Because it's picked very early, obviously. And instead of prioritizing, the alternative would have been to blind mid and top here, and which is actually fine, because they could have just picked things like Crescente, or honestly just Crescente. It comes to mind, maybe Aatrox as well, if this was their plan to begin with. But there were some options for them to really start off the draft differently as well. They could have also, if they were going for something like this anyway, they could have even left Nico open. I'm sure Caps is very proficient on this. So the rationale behind allowing upfronting the AD support in this situation where they're so narrowly their strengths are so narrow, it's a little bit weird. In B4, B5, to be clear, this might have been an excellent pick because that's the slot where you want to be taking advantage of your comp's weaknesses, because then G2 would see 4 picks from BLG. And then if BLG probably would have picked something, some more engage or some generic picks that would probably like enhance the strength of the Braum, right? If you go like Kasante, or what other mid laners are there? Some random mid laner that could do well as a control mage or something like that. Talia even, just something that gets resources for this team that can get things going and facilitate. Even Ari in this case, right? Because now what happens is that BLG switch up their pick. There's almost this guaranteed chance. Like Milio is not strong enough to be blinded right now as an enchanter. It is almost a guaranteed chance that the support pick would have been something different from BLG if they did not see Braum already. Braum, Kog'Maw, right? They know nothing's happening in this lane. So in order to answer, BLG have to pick something that can scale well and compensate for the weakness that Xayah has. Milio is the best bet, at least right now, with a combination of strong laning and scaling range, which is something that is very unique and actually allows Xayah to match Kog'Maw in some way. So that's their first mistake. If they were going, this is further reinforced by going things like Jace Poppy to begin with, right? I honestly would have been even okay with a Jarvan ban, forgoing the Jarvan ban rather, B1ing Poppy as a flex, just in case of this, if they're going to go for something like this, just so they can push Kog'Maw Braum back to a very important slot. On paper, this comp's actually really sick. I love it. It's really cool, you know? Very creative identity in order to answer what a lot of teams are going for, and it's very unique. But it's around it. There is a methodology for picking these things, and if they allowed BLG to fumble a little bit more before all-inning, that would be my main source of feedback here, because now BLG have a lot of time to answer with picks that kind of neutralize the advantage that picking something like this would gain. Moving on to game 2. G2 go for a completely different direction, along with BLG, to be honest with you, in the form of a Giga forward comp. But again, I would say it's a similar issue with kind of just revealing super early on what they're trying to do. The reason I say this is because they do get good matchups on a lot of their team comps, or a lot of their matchups rather, but it's not enough when it comes to understanding that they're giving a lot of information to allow BLG to spec their comp perfectly to what G2 is trying to do. So because Nocturne is revealed along with Kai'Sa so early, just so much forward stuff, I believe it was either with the list support for Mickey as well, they managed to spec one of the tankiest AD carries in the game as well. It would be this or Aphelios. It was their choice, along with Rakan. But they managed to pick one of the tankier AD carries in order to prevent something like this. So again, it's like, it's a cool way to approach the draft, but I still don't like it. You know what I mean? It could be still allowed because they have really strong matchups, especially on top, but directionally and like overall high level in terms of their draft, it was a little bit weak. They finally get punished for it in game 3, where I think in this case they just give up a little bit too much. They sacked an Orianna ban in exchange for, I believe, picking up the Nico ban on their side, as well as the Jax. And because they gave up things, the big 3 here, this usually spells a pretty hard draft, in my opinion. I've been seeing more and more. When you get the big 3, 2 blindable solo laners plus J4, an all-inclusive jungler, you have the opportunity to pick whatever special bottom lane you want. You can pick any bottom lane in the game that answers your team on 4, and I think it's very hard for your team to play. because you have strong lanes mid top, you have a bottom lane counter pick in a meta where bottom lane counter pick is extremely powerful, and top and mid lane blind picks are extremely powerful, and you basically just lose from there. And you're forced into Kaisa Bard, like, ugh, you know? I understand that the attempt that G2 were going for, and it was really good, especially for the first 2 games. This one, not so much. It's a little bit weird. They just have triple losing lanes, and they kind of fumbled it here. But you see what they were going for. So it's just wrong. It's like the right thing at the wrong time, but too many times in a row. That's the theme of this draft. So the main takeaway here would be like, you have these picks prepared, but you have to be able to understand the consequences, the implications, what makes sense in terms of the timing of each of it, and why that's important. Because every time you lock in a pick, that changes what options the enemy team has, what options your team has. And ultimately, that's going to be what maximizing the amount of options you have remaining for as long as possible is what draft is about. So hopefully this makes sense to you guys. I'll catch you in the next one. Cheers.